Hi, my name is Mike Wise, and today I'm going to show you how to make your own life-saving cannabis oil. This is also called Rick Simpson oil, Phoenix Tears, or FECO, fully extracted cannabis oil. There's many ways to make it. I'm just going to show you the simplest way that you can make it at home. I normally use this bad boy, Moonshine Distiller, but today we're going to show you how to do it in a rice cooker. So I'm going to go over the list of supplies that you'll need in order to do this yourself at home. First and foremost, you'll need a rice cooker. I recommend one that can boil at least 6 cups. We'll get into why I recommend that later. A spatula. You'll need coffee filters. I use wide mouth quart mason jars. A Ninja blender. I like to use a heat gun. You can find this at your local hardware store. They're fairly inexpensive, but this is very important in knowing exactly how to control your temperature and what your temperature is. A hot plate, and I use this specific one because I use a still. I make this oil very often, about 5 days out of the week, for terminal patients. So I need kind of a bigger industrial way of making it, but any hot plate will do. They have digital ones online that are really cheap, $40 or so. But as long as you have one of these, the quality doesn't matter as much because you can dial in the temperature with your heat gun. Also, I recommend using grain alcohol. This one is 190 proof. The higher the better. I know it's hard to find it in some states. If you can't, it is crucial that you go across state lines and do get the good stuff. 190 proof grain alcohol. If you're making this oil for yourself, you don't really need gloves, but I make it for patients. Gloves are very crucial in that. I don't want to put germs, get it dirty. And of course you need the flour. So this is very important too. We're going to use a high strength indica today, high THC indica. And I normally make it with a pound at a time, which will yield about 60 grams of this oil. And 60 grams will cure most cancers, but not all. I've seen people have to take up to 240. And also, you're going to need syringes. I usually use 10 milliliter syringes. A gram is generally equivalent to a milliliter, so these are basically 10 gram syringes. And that's all the supplies you're going to need. I'm going to now go into actually making this process. When we're doing it, we're going to need this fan. A fan is very important to have. When you're boiling off the alcohol, there is a risk of fire, small explosion, danger. So you need to do this in a well-ventilated area. We're going to do this near a window or outside. It's definitely what I recommend, so you can get the fumes away from the crock pot, because if not, they're going to continue to accumulate in here, and any open flames could cause a fire or explosion, which is why your hot plate needs to not have an open flame. It's very important that the hot plate you choose does not have an open flame. So for the first part of this process, you need to grind your material in order to get the alcohol to be able to wash all the resins off. That's what we're doing in this process, is we're using alcohol to wash the resins off of the plant, and then we're boiling the alcohol off, and what's left is just a pure cannabis oil, what they refer to as full spectrum. And what that means is that it has not only high THC, that's the main thing. THC is the what we find to kill the cancers, the brain tumors, all the serious conditions. Pretty much every condition, I recommend using this oil and making it with a high THC strain and an indica. And the reason why we choose an indica strain is because we want to encourage sleep in the patient. Someone with cancer or terminal diagnosis generally will sleep for the first 3 weeks of taking this medicine. And I'll go into dosing a little bit later on. So for the first part, we grind this up in the blender. We load everything up in your blender. I like to load it just to above the blades, and go ahead and grind it. And not too long. This enough so you got a fine grind all the way through. You don't want to really have any nugs in there. And of course there's other ways of doing it. Like I said, I'm just going to teach you the way I do it. Some people will soak the material and then grind it or agitate it. I like to grind it first and then wash the material after. So after you have it grinded, there's still a little bit of nugs in there, but that's fine. Go ahead and put your bud into your quart size wide mouth mason jar. Once you're grinding and you get to about, I would say, this under the lid of the jar, that's when you would stop filling it up and you would start on another jar. And we're going to put the alcohol in here later and agitate it, mix it around. But yeah, I like to fill my jars to just about that height. Once you have that, get the next one and repeat. Now that you've finished grinding all the material, it's time to actually wash the resins off. You can do 2 washes total is what I recommend. And so I'll go through the steps of how to do a wash. Basically, before you start your wash, you're going to want to get your alcohol and run it all through the grinder that you used, the blender in this case. And you want to make sure you get all the remaining THC, resins, all that good stuff off of there, because there's medicinal value in all that. That's where the medicinal value lies, is in those resins and in those trichomes. So once you've washed it all out, then you pour it into your jar and you fill the rest of the jar with alcohol. I like to fill it till it's just covered the top of the material. So we'll let it soak in. So just enough to get to the top of the material. Then you shut your mason jar, cap it, and then you're going to want to shake it for 2 to 3 minutes. This is where you actually wash the resins off the plant, and then we're going to filter them off into just an oil before we boil it out. Okay, so now that your 2 to 3 minute wash is done, now you take off the cap. Go ahead and let the rest of the alcohol drip off the top back into the jar. And then this is where you get your coffee filter. And so what I like to do is I use the same lid that was on the mason jar, and if this was the top, I put the coffee filter upside down through it. And so what you want to do is put this as close to the lip as you can. If you make it so it's really far past the edge, so like instead of this far, if you make it where it's actually this far, it's not going to drain. It's going to take a long time to drain. So what you want to do is put it as close to the lip as you can. I like to fold it over. I find that works best when I fold it back over the lid. And after you're done with that, go ahead and replace this back on the mason jar, recap it. And so if there is parts like this where it is sticking out, where when it's on the top and it's loosely there, you can pull it up and adjust it that way. And you get your other quart size mason jar. Make sure they're both wide mouth, and then flip it over. It'll then begin to drain. And so this is what's called a wash. You can do this 2 times. After you finish it the first time, and all the alcohol is out, and there's no more alcohol left in your material, go ahead, take the cap off, fill it back up till the material is covered with alcohol, shake it for another 2 to 3 minutes, put the coffee filter back on, flip it upside down, drain it, and then you're done with your second wash. You can do that 2 times total. And so I'll go into dosing really quick while I talk about all this. Dosing is a tricky thing, and it's different for every person. But it's one of the questions I get asked the most. This oil will cure a terminal condition. I've seen it cure many of these conditions in person. In fact, I haven't seen one that it hasn't cured. And what we do know as far as dosing goes is that you can't overdose. No one in the history of taking this oil has overdosed from taking it. Often they'll say, oh, well, you know, I'm afraid of getting high. I don't want to get high. And to me, I just find that comical. I find it funny because they're taking so many of these prescription drugs that get you so high. but yet they're afraid of the high that's associated with cannabis. You know, the reefer madness mentality. And so to those patients, I say, if you don't get high, you don't get healed. That's why many of these companies, they play on those fears. And they'll say, oh, try using THCA, the acid form of THC, or try using a high CBD oil. Well, my friends, that's not going to cure your condition. You have to have a high THC oil. Those cannabinoids have their place, but not in curing terminal conditions. And so the important thing about this oil is that it's referred to as a full spectrum oil. And what that means is when you make it, it's high in THC, but it has all the other cannabinoids in there as well. It has small amounts of CBD, CBG, CBN, and all the other 144 known compounds that we know today. It also has flavonoids and terpenoids. All of these work in conjunction. They work together with each other to create what's known as the entourage effect, which makes the THC fight these cancers and these terminal conditions and these diseases, really whatever you're going through. It makes the THC stronger, and it makes all the other cannabinoids work together in order to cure the condition. What's also very crucial in this process is a change in diet. And so what I mean by that is this medicine will work quicker and more efficiently if you change your diet when you're dealing with a terminal condition. What you're going to need to do is switch to a high alkaline diet. So that means eat foods that are rich in flavonoids, raise your body's pH to above 7, and avoid all refined sugars and carbohydrates. Take them completely out of your diet. And that diet change, taken in conjunction with this oil, will cure or control pretty much any disease you're going through. I have seen this high THC oil work on every type of brain cancer and tumor except for one, and it's very important to note this one type of cancer. You'll need to make a slight adjustment when making this oil. And the cancer I'm referring to is estrogen-driven cancer. It's also called estrogen-fed. ER positive is another word for it. So what I do for the patients who come to me with the estrogen-fed breast cancer, the estrogen-driven, the estrogen-positive breast cancer, is I make them an oil with 1 pound of high THC indica flower, and I make them an oil with the high CBD, hemp, or other cannabis flower separately. And then I have them take a gram of each per day. So I found the medical system to be incredibly corrupt. They just want to get money off of you. They just want you to pay $10,000 per round for chemo. All that kind of nonsense. So they can poison you, literally, with mustard gas. And that's why, a big part of why this medicine that you can easily make at home is still illegal. Because they have vested interest in profiting off of this. Well, you can grow this from a seed at your house and make this oil and cure your condition, or family member or friends, literally save their life with about $100 of materials and a seed. And the medical industry, they don't want you to know this. So they play a big part in making the plant, keeping it illegal. A lot of activists out there are fighting for legalization. What we're talking about here is the repeal of prohibition. That's really what's going on. These laws were only made in the 1900s. They were made fairly recently. This plant and this medicine has been used for thousands of years around the world. So how can a legislator or a lawmaker tell you that you cannot cure yourself from a condition? So what I recommend is for those people who want to go educate their lawmakers about this medicine is to take a syringe of it with you and tell them, this is my medicine. And when you show them that syringe and you talk about how you need cannabis for your specific treatment, that's what you choose, show them that syringe and they'll start thinking differently. They're not going to think, oh, you're out here to smoke weed, or you're out here to smoke dabs or concentrates. You're just here to get high. They're going to see that syringe and they're going to think, oh wow, well, this is a medicine. And then you can tell them how you can cure cancer with it. You can cure any disease with this. And once you approach them like that, I think it really will help to change and guide the story, guide how this story needs to be framed. Because we need to frame it in the right light. When you go out there and talk about, oh, I need to legalize weed, they think, oh, you're just going to smoke. Well, when you take these syringes and you say, this is what I need to be legal, please repeal these prohibition laws, I think they'll think differently about it. So while we let those drain, I want to get into dosing. So there's 3 methods of ingesting this medicine. You can do it orally, you can apply it to the upper gums, that's the second way, or you can do it via suppository. A lot of patients, if they don't like the taste, I recommend these gelatin capsules or vegetable capsules you can find at your local organic grocery store. If they don't mind the taste, you can just put it in your mouth, put it on your finger. We usually recommend starting off with half a grain of rice or 1 grain of rice size amount. What I mean by that is if you were to lay it out on your finger, it would equal the length approximately of a grain of rice or a half a grain of rice. So that right there would be about a grain of rice. You take this 3 times a day, apply it to your upper gums, and that's the most effective method of ingestion if you're going to do it orally. However, the way to get the most medical benefits is to do it via suppository. So what I do is I get those gelatin capsules or vegetable capsules, whatever you prefer, and I'll put about a fourth or a third of it of coconut oil. And the reason why you add coconut oil, you can use cocoa oil, which I've heard is more effective. Today we're going to use coconut oil. What it does is it makes the THC enter your bloodstream quicker. And they call that bioavailability. It increases your bioavailability. So then after that, after there's a fourth or a third coconut oil in there, I go ahead and I fill the rest of it up with your cannabis oil. So now that it's full, what you're going to want to do is recap it. You just go ahead and you put the cap back on, and there you have a suppository. So what I do after this at this point is I get a little bit more coconut oil and I apply it around the end of it. And then that serves as your lubricant. So there's a very simple, very clean method of using a suppository. And so I found that these suppositories offer the most medicinal relief. You take a half a rice grain or a full rice grain size amount 3 times a day. Apply it to your upper gums, ingest it orally or via suppository. Whatever you choose, suppository offers the most relief. You do that 3 times a day for 3 days. On the 4th day, you double your dose. And you keep doubling your dose every 4 days until you're up to 1 gram a day. The goal is to ingest 60 grams in 90 days. That should cure or control most diseases. However, I have seen some people need to take up to 240 grams. Alright, so now that we have all of this strained and filtered, we are ready to take this into our rice cooker and take it outside. So, come on, let's go. Now we're actually going to boil off the alcohol that we used to wash the resins off, and what we're going to be left with is a very thin layer of pure cannabis oil. So what you're going to do is you get your mixture of oil, go ahead and put that in the rice cooker, and make sure you set it to the cook setting. All rice cookers are going to generally start on the warm setting. Make sure to switch it to cook. That's the heat setting. That's what we're going to use to boil off all the alcohol vapors. We came outside because that's where I find it's best to do something like this, a well-ventilated area. If you are going to do it inside, make sure it's very ventilated. Use a fan, and what this fan does is it blows the vapors away and out from the top of the rice cooker. If you don't have this fan, the vapors are just going to continue to swirl inside of here, and that's what causes the fire or small explosion danger. So you want to make sure that you have a fan when you're doing this, and I definitely recommend doing it outside like we're doing today. And after you are finished with the boiling of the alcohol, we are going to take this back inside, and that's where we'll do the final decarboxylation part of this process. Alright, now that we finished boiling off all the alcohol, we're going to continue to decarb it inside on a hot plate where I have more of a steady temperature. So this is where your heat gun comes into play. I like to leave mine around 180, 190. Don't ever go above 280, but anything around there, 180, 190 should be fine. Set your hot plate at that, and make sure that that's the temperature it is while you're cooking it. So that's why it's good to have one of these heat guns, because it'll always tell you what temperature is. So the way you'll know that your oil is fully decarbed is when you're heating it at a set temperature. 180, 190 is where I like to keep it, for a set amount of time, an hour, 2 hours. Might take longer depending how much oil you have. But when you have it heating at that temperature and there's no bubbles bubbling up in the mixture, it's this flat, even, smooth, that's when you know that your oil is ready and it's fully decarbed, fully decarboxylated, fully active. And that's when it's ready to ingest and produce the medical healing effects. I find syringes are the best thing to use to transport this medication in. They're always labeled so you know exactly how much you're dosing, and they're clean, they're not messy at all. Thank you for tuning in today and learning how to make this life-saving oil. As you can see, this is a process that you really can't do yourself easily at home. You can take your health into your own hands. You don't have to rely on the medical system to cure pretty much any disease or illness that you or a family member is going through. If you want more information on me or what I'm doing, check me out online, facebook.com/Mike Wise Show. I host a show every week. Tune in. Say what's up. I'd love to hear from you. See you guys.